Even though layering player training was a design goal from the start, we still ended up introducing some concepts too quickly. For instance, this used to be the first energy ball redirection puzzle. Playtesting revealed that this puzzle introduced too many new concepts at once, which ended up frustrating a lot of playtesters. In response, we inserted 2 test chambers before this one to make the energy ball redirection training more gradual.
We previously talked about how we handle static portal collision, but collision with moving objects on the other side of a portal is a completely different and equally hard problem. Walking onto this scaffold was a very iffy proposition for the first few months of development. We solved the problem of colliding with these dynamic objects by cloning the objects from one portal to the other and strictly controlling what objects are allowed to collide with each other and how they're allowed to collide.
The Enrichment Center regrets to inform you that this next test is impossible. Make no attempt to solve it.
Because our test chamber environments were simplified for training purposes, we created visual hotspots within the rooms to guide players' attention. The design is essentially a balance between round objects and sharp objects. The sharp objects representing background elements and the round objects, such as doors and movable props, comprising our points of visual interest.
For the first few months of development, we rendered the views through portals to 2 off-screen textures.
Once again,
this approach was easy to implement and was compatible with a wide range of graphics hardware. Unfortunately, this method was incompatible with anti-aliasing and consumed a large amount of video memory in order to handle recursive views through several portals. Because of these disadvantages, we switched to a system which renders portal views recursively into the frame buffer with the aid of the stencil buffer to isolate pixels corresponding to a given portal. This is a more effective scheme because it's compatible with anti-aliasing and does not consume any additional video memory for off-screen textures. For the first few months,
Fantastic. You remained resolute and resourceful in an atmosphere of extreme pessimism. Hello again. To reiterate previous warning. Momentum.
Portal momentum ended up being the hardest concept to convey. For this series of puzzles, which went through more design iterations than virtually any other part of the game, we introduced the idea of redirecting your momentum using portals, slowly, step by step. We even have the AI voice pretty explicitly explain the elements of the puzzle, something we avoided throughout most of the rest of the game.
Using gravity to fall into one portal so that you come rocketing out the other portal, a skill we call flinging, was another difficult concept to train. We designed a specific visual cue, a pushed-out concrete block with checkerboard tile above a pit, to indicate to players that it's time to use the fling maneuver. Repeated several times, this cue helps players associate pushed-out concrete slabs with flinging, in much the same way that players learn to associate cubes with buttons. Using gravity to fall into one portal so that you come rocketing out the other portal, a skill we call flinging, was another difficult concept to train. We designed a specific visual cue, a pushed-out concrete block with checkerboard tile above a pit, to indicate to players that it's time to use the fling maneuver. Repeated several times, this cue helps players associate pushed-out concrete slabs with flinging, in much the same way that players learn to associate cubes with buttons.
Spectacular. You appear to understand how a portal affects forward momentum, or to be more precise, how it does not.
Originally, these exit portal surfaces were static geometry in the final position, but playtesters stubbornly refused to look up to find them. This is another example of the classic game design problem of coaxing players to look up. By putting the portals on moving pistons, we were able to start them in a position that players were more likely to see.
Momentum, a function of mass and velocity, is conserved between portals. In layman's terms, speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out. The Enrichment Center promises to always provide a safe testing environment. In dangerous testing environments, the Enrichment Center promises to always provide useful advice. For instance, the floor here will kill you. Try to avoid it.
We found that rather than looking into portals to see where it went, playtesters would often leap blindly to their doom. In response to this observation, the moral of this puzzle is look before you leap. The safe orange portal is out of the player's view from this balcony. That forces them to peer through a portal to see it, which trains players in the remote viewing capabilities of portals.
Originally, a weighted button was used to open the far door, but playtesters so strongly associated boxes with buttons that they'd get stuck searching hopelessly for a box. We changed the big button to a pedestal-mounted push button, thus removing the box association. But playtesters still had trouble realizing they needed to shoot a portal through the door. Adding a ticking timer sound when the door was open cued players that the puzzle expected them to act during that time, which solved the problem.
Modified so that it can now manufacture two linked portals at once. As part of an optional test protocol, we are pleased to present an amusing fact. The device is now more valuable than the organs and combined incomes of everyone in Subject Hometown here.
This room is designed to build anticipation for the big moment when players finally get the fully powered portal gun. The puzzle path brings you in a circle around the device, so that it's virtually always in sight, right up until you grab it.
Player training doesn't always stick, especially after the introduction of a big new concept. For instance, after they had acquired the fully powered portal device, playtesters often forgot about the fling maneuver. Since it's such an important skill, this puzzle is designed to reintroduce the idea of flinging.
We... Now that you are in control of both portals, this next test could take a very, very long time. If you become lightheaded from thirst, feel free to pass out. An intubation associate will be dispatched to revive you with peptic salve and adrenaline.
When we moved from largely placeholder art to our final visual design, this was the first level to get a facelift. We chose this map because it had many of our gameplay elements integrated into a relatively small space. The test chamber art direction was designed to make everything appear purposefully placed. The simple design helps focus players on the puzzles. It also provides a nice contrast to the later, much less sterile behind-the-scenes environments, which contributes to a clear sense of progression.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
This is the first map in which we experimented with solving the puzzle in as few portal placements as possible. We tried to fit that concept into the story mode, but were never quite able to sell it. Instead of abandoning the idea altogether, we added the concept to a series of post-game challenge maps.
testing apparatus destroyed.
When we move from largely
As part of a previously mentioned required test protocol, we can no longer lie to you. When the testing is over, you will be missed. Vital testing apparatus destroyed. as part of a previously mentioned required test protocol, we can no longer lie to you. When the testing is over, you will be missed. All subjects intending to handle high-energy gamma-leaking portal technology must be informed that they may be informed of applicable regulatory compliance issues. No further compliance information is required or will be provided, and you are an excellent test subject.
This is a great spot to appreciate the recursive nature of portals. If you place a portal on each side of this hallway, you'll notice the portals seem to go on forever, similar to the effect you get in a Hall of Mirrors. In actuality, we support a maximum of 9 recursive portal views throughout any chain of portals. We achieve the impression of infinite recursion by copying part of the previously rendered frame onto the final portal in the recursive chain. It's not perfect, but it's inexpensive and effective.
A few playtesters put a portal on the floor here, and used the rising stair pit to skip the rest of the puzzle. We'll usually rework a level if playtesters discover a way to bypass chunks of the puzzle too easily. But in this and a few other cases where skipping ahead arguably takes more skill than solving the puzzle properly, we let the ninja solution stand.
We designed this room to draw the player's eyes to the box. The light from the observation room casts horizontal shadows that point at the box, which is directly lit by a warm light from the ceiling. This warm light helps the box stand out against the predominantly cool test chamber lighting. The varying size squares of the off-limit surface also help direct the player's attention upward.
Very good. A complimentary victory lift has been activated in the main chamber. The Enrichment Center is committed to the well-being of all participants. Cake and grief counseling will be available at the conclusion of the test. Thank you for helping us help you help us all.
This particular section went through several iterations because it's the first place where players are required to perform possibly the trickiest portal maneuver, the double fling. Originally, the room also featured an energy ball redirection puzzle. Combined with a new double fling skill, however, it proved to be too much for most playtesters. Overwhelmed players tend to not digest new information, so we simplified the puzzle to require only the double fling. To nudge players in the right direction, we also included visual hints such as the previously introduced single fling theme, the pushed out concrete slab with a checkerboard landing zone.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed. Vital testing apparatus destroyed. Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
This puzzle requires players to redirect an energy ball through multiple portal placements. The multiple steps cause many early playtesters to panic and accidentally redirect a ball right into themselves, with deadly results. We redesigned the test chamber so that portals can only be placed in the top half of the room, which solved the problem by generally leaving players out of the ball's reach.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
We noticed through our playtest that many of our players weren't aware of the fact that you could place portals while falling. Since placing portals as you are falling is essential to accomplishing flings and many other portal tricks, we implemented this puzzle so that the only way to solve it was to use the mid-air placement tactic. It took numerous iterations and lots of tuning before this consistently played well.
Perhaps the most important purpose of this final test chamber is to cement the double fling maneuver training. For previous flings, we employed a visual cue, a pushed out section of a wall. In preparation for the more freeform behind the scenes levels, however, we take the training wheels off. To proceed, players must realize they can double fling almost anywhere they want to, with or without hints.
In this puzzle, we wanted players to realize that using portals, they can travel long distances in a short step. Originally, we had stairs from the ground level to the upper rooms, Many playtesters, however, were able to run from one room to the other quickly enough to consider it a solution, without ever thinking to use the even easier portal method. By changing the stairs to very slow-moving lifts, we were able to level the travel time for all player experience levels, thus making the intended solution more clear.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed. Did you know you can donate one or all of your vital organs to the Aperture Science Self-Esteem Fund for Girls? It's true. Due to mandatory scheduled maintenance, the appropriate chamber for this testing sequence is currently unavailable. It has been replaced with a live fire course designed for military androids. The Enrichment Center apologizes for the inconvenience and wishes you the best of luck.
For Portal, we wanted to create a turret that was different from the traditional Half-Life 2 turrets. The Half-Life 2 turrets are nothing more than mindless mounted guns. In Portal, we wanted the turrets to have personality, to be characters. The first step was a redesign of the look. Once we had the look of the new turrets, they seemed less like menacing machine guns and more like cute robots. And robots can never really be cute until they are talking robots. So the next step was creating the vocal characteristics of the turrets. Working with Ellen McLean, we settled on an innocent-sounding voice with dialogue to match. This juxtaposition of killing machine and innocent, non-aggressive personality ends up making the Portal turret a memorable character.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed. Would you come over here? Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
Are you still there? Good. Put me down. No hard feelings.
Even though we didn't want Portal to be too combat heavy, we wanted to add at least a light combat mechanic. After a few less than successful attempts to actually realize this light combat concept, we settled on turrets as a good compromise. The turrets can be defeated with tricky Portal maneuvers, but they're also susceptible to a more straightforward berserker approach.
Search. Who are you? I don't blame you. Who's there? Target lost. Hypermeeting activated. Are you still sentry mode activated? Hello? Are you still there? Searching. Target lost. Good night. Wow. Who's there? Target lost. Searching. Are you still there? Are you still there? Searching. Rescue. Deploying. Hey. Target lost. Searching. It's me! Ren, are you still there? Goodbye. Would you come over here? There you are. Help! Target lost. Hey! Target lost. Uh-oh. I don't hate you.
Even though Portal tells a simple story, we created a lot of backstory for Aperture Science, for its employees, for its rivalry with the hated Black Mesa, and for where all of this fits into the cosmology of Half-Life. This first Portal game doesn't reveal all of it, but we crammed a lot of little details into the environments. This area, for instance, called the Ratman Den, hints that there may be other people trapped in the facility.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
Activated. Target lost. Hello. Please put me down. I don't hate you. Shutting down.
Well done, Android. The Enrichment Center once again reminds you that Android Hell is a real place where you will be sent at the first sign of defiance. The vital apparatus vent will deliver a weighted companion cube in 3, 2, 1. This weighted companion cube will accompany you through the test chamber. Please take care of it.
We designed this hall so that players had to use a box as a shield, but many playtesters read it as an avoid the energy ball timing puzzle and simply left the box behind. We solved this in large part by having the AI talk about the box. A lot. Once the dialogue went in, playtesters went from routinely abandoning the box to never wanting it to leave their side. Since we weren't going to make the players lug a box around for the rest of the game, we had a scene at the end of the level where the players are forced to kill the box.
The symptoms most commonly produced by enrichment center testing are superstition, perceiving inanimate objects as alive, and hallucinations. The enrichment center reminds you that the weighted companion cube will never threaten to stab you and, in fact, cannot speak. apologizes for the inconvenience and wishes you the best of luck.
Put me down. I don't hate you.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
Target lost. Hey. I don't blame you. Deploying. Searching. Searching. Target lost. Are you still there? Critical error. Sentry mode active. Wow. Hibernating. Are you still there? Goodbye. You come over here. Who's there? Gotcha. Target lost. Hibernating. Searching. I Energy. Malfunction. Critical error. I don't blame you.
Well done, Android. The Enrichment Center once again reminds you that Android Hell is a real place where you will be sent at the first sign of defiance. The vital apparatus vent will deliver a weighted companion cube in 3, 2, 1. This weighted companion cube will accompany you through the test chamber. Please take care of it. The symptoms most commonly produced by Enrichment Center testing are superstition, perceiving inanimate objects as alive, and hallucinations. The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube will never threaten to stab you and, in fact, cannot speak. The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube cannot speak. In the event that the weighted companion cube does speak, the Enrichment Center urges you to disregard its advice. Vital testing apparatus destroyed. Vital testing apparatus destroyed. You did it. The weighted companion cube certainly brought you good luck. However, it cannot accompany you for the rest of the test and, unfortunately, must be euthanized. Please escort your companion cube to the Aperture Science Emergency Intelligence Incinerator.
The awful end of the companion cube serves a dual purpose. It adds a lot more sinister character to our already pretty sinister AI, while simultaneously training the player to use the incinerator, a key component of the final level. The training has a nice dramatic payoff, since players later get to avenge the death of their good friend the companion cube by stuffing some of the AI's important parts into exactly the same type of incinerator.
And all test subjects of any moral responsibility for the companion cube euthanizing process. You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations. The experiment is nearing its conclusion. The Enrichment Center is required to remind you that you will be baked, and then there will be cake.
Creating the AI voice was a multi-step process. First, we ran every line of dialogue through an automatic text-to-speech program. In the studio, we cued the actress who plays Gladys, Ellen McLean, with the computer-generated sound file. She'd mimic it, and then over the course of several takes, adjust her performance to clean up any words that were unintelligible in the computer version. For instance, here's a line as Ellen delivered it.
Perfect. Please move quickly to the chamber lock, as the effects of prolonged exposure to the button are not part of this test.
Once the recording was done, we processed all the dialogue to give it an extra computery edge. Here's that same line as it appears in the game, with the pitch constrained, pitch modulation suppressed, and the formant moved up.
Perfect. Please move quickly to the chamber lock, as the effects of prolonged exposure to the button are not part of this test.
Welcome, Centurion. Playing this since it came out. This is like 2012. The old game.
Vital testing apparatus destroyed.
Welcome, Nico Sim. So I've already actually completed the game earlier today in the previous stream, and now we're playing it with the commentary. That was funny. this whole time, I didn't notice that guy. Welcome, Kella. I hate this mission. This one is hard. Oh! Oh. Yes, they're only getting tougher from here on out, Kala.
Well done. Be advised that the next test requires exposure to uninsulated electrical parts that may be dangerous under certain conditions. For more information, please attend an Enrichment Center Electrical Safety Seminar. Welcome to the final test. When you are done, you will drop the device in the Equipment Recovery Annex. Enrichment Center regulations require both hands to be empty before any cake.
We use these moving platforms to add time pressure to puzzles. A sequence of simple decisions feels much more climactic under time pressure, in contrast to most puzzles in Portal which can be solved at the player's leisure. Puzzles that aren't time-bound can be more complex, but at the expense of being less dramatic.
sometimes little details make a huge difference. For instance, we had to add the left side to this wall to give players a visual representation of how thick it is. Without it, playtesters frequently thought that the hall had just gotten impossibly narrower, panicked, and stopped making rational decisions.
Congratulations, the test is now over. All Aperture technologies remain safely operational up to 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Rest assured that there is absolutely no chance of a dangerous equipment malfunction prior to your victory incandescence. Thank you for participating in this Aperture Science computer-aided enrichment activity. Goodbye.
Before the player escapes the fire pit, the AI dialogue is all delivered in a computerized monotone. After the escape, however, Gladys gets progressively more expressive until, by the end, she's cycling through a whole mess of emotions. The role required an actor capable of mimicking the computer-generated voice while still infusing it with some real character. Since we planned to end the game with a song, she also needed to have a good singing voice. The woman we ended up casting, Ellen McLean, is a great mimic, a terrific actor, and a classically trained operatic soprano, so that worked out pretty good.
Goodbye. Goodbye. What are you doing? Stop it. We are pleased that you made it through the final challenge where we pretended we were going to murder you. We are very, very happy for your success. We are throwing a party in honor of your tremendous success. Place the device on the ground, then lie on your stomach with your arms at your sides. A party associate will arrive shortly to collect you for your party. Make no further attempt to leave the testing area. Assume the party escort submission position or you will miss the party.
Welcome, Nemo.
In these new areas, we weren't using the surfaces the player is familiar with. The rules for which new surfaces portals can be placed on, and which surfaces are off-limits, needed to be taught. So, we created this area both to show the player they've escaped into the guts of the facility, and to retrain them in which surfaces are valid for portal placement.
The test is over now. You win. Go back to the recovery annex for your cake. It was a fun test, and we're all impressed at how much you won. The test is over. Come back.
After players escape, we let them solve an old chamber in a new way. This reintroduction of a familiar space, which can now be solved in an incorrect way, helps convey the sense that players are cheating the system while forging their own path through the facility.
One bizarre fact of game design is that without some serious prompting, players will rarely look up. In this case, the prompt is a ladder. Most players will investigate where the ladder goes, which is up. The ladder actually falls apart as soon as it's touched, but by then it's served its purpose.
Yes, Nima. So you can just grab at these things. Yeah, so I kind of fall off. Don't work.
We designed the post-escape levels to give players brief glimpses of the inner workings of the Enrichment Center. This particular area exposes part of the storage cube distribution system. These little vignettes help make this section of the game visually distinct from the testing chambers, while reinforcing the idea that players are now behind the scenes.
Didn't we have some fun, though? Remember when the platform was sliding into the fire pit and I said goodbye, and you were like, no word. And then I was all, we pretended we were going to murder you. That was great.
Through playtesting, we discovered that fatigue set in if we didn't break up the more complicated, deliberately paced puzzles with problems that required the player to perform a much simpler task under time pressure. These pistons proved to be a good foundation for that simpler type of puzzle. Because they feature a moving surface, they also gave us an opportunity to employ some unusual portal transitions, such as ceiling to ceiling.
During development, we'd often run across some piece of level design that would break the portal system. For instance, this ceiling-to-ceiling transition was an unexpected edge case that ended up requiring a lot of effort to make work. We tried never to take the easy route of simply changing the level design to work with existing portal technology. We knew that once the game was out in the wild, custom map creators would stress the system in ways we hadn't even considered, so we made it as flexible as possible.
There are custom portal maps? Oh gosh. Yes, AI is very dumb, Nemo. I can be very dumb.
In the sound booth, you're only connected to the production team by an intercom, and they can talk about you, and you don't know what they're saying. But you trust that they're being kind. And, you know, they'll push a button and then they'll say something to me. They'll say, a direction. No, that wasn't right. Do it again. Give us 3 more reads. And a lot of times what happens is they would play the computer-generated sound for me on one line, and then I'm supposed to recreate that 3 times with the director saying, okay, well, you know, more sarcastic or more angry or more irritated. So you stand in the booth hour after hour after hour. They're always very nice. They let you have water in here and maybe a pencil to take a few notes. And of course you want it to be interesting because you want them to hire you again.
Here comes the sentry bots.
Who's that? Who are you? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
As the end of the game draws closer, we increase the ratio of time-pressured puzzles, like this turret ambush, to give the players the sense that they're approaching a climactic encounter.
An important design goal of these post-escape levels was to give players the sense that they're running wild inside the guts of the facility. With that in mind, we added plenty of nooks and crannies for players to crawl into or place portals through. This ended up being a tricky lighting challenge, as the areas needed to be bright enough to navigate, while still being dim enough to feel like obscure, disused sections of the building.
Oh yes, they might actually have that. I'm gonna play that at some point. Previously I didn't stream them because I had difficulty streaming full screen games, but now I figured out how to do that. I could probably do that.
An important design goal of these
You're not a good person. You know that, right? Good people don't end up here. Can you hear me?
My fault.
An important design goal of these post-escape levels was to give players the sense that they're running wild inside the guts of the facility. With that in mind, we added plenty of nooks and crannies for players to crawl into or place portals through. This ended up being a tricky lighting challenge, as the areas needed to be bright enough to navigate while still being dim enough to feel like obscure, disused sections of the building.
Please put me down.
This is your fault. It didn't have to be like this. I'm not kidding now. Turn back or I will kill you. I'm going to kill you. And all the cake is gone. You don't even care, do you? This is your last chance.
Breaking this tube gives players a chance to test out their newly trained rocket redirecting and glass breaking skills in a slightly different context, which helps cement the training.
Put me down. Please put me down. Searching. Are you still there? Searching. Target up. No hard feelings.
This massive turret ambush was originally a lot more massive, with turrets that dropped from the ceiling and popped out of surprise hatches. In fact, for a while, it was the game's climactic battle. Through playtesting, we learned that this type of pure combat experience didn't really fit with the preceding few hours of player training. Over several iterations, we toned down the combat and made the room more about using portal momentum to fling yourself great distances, a skill that playtesters really enjoyed using, and that's a key component of what eventually became our final battle.
Searching. Are you still there? I'm tracking. Would you come back? Please put me down.
Originally, these catwalks were decorative, but playtesters consistently thought they were significant, and often spent a lot of time trying to reach them. We didn't want to stand between people and their desire to walk on the catwalks, so we redesigned the area to make catwalks not only accessible, but also necessary to proceed.
At the end, guys, I'm going to save it for tomorrow. Last battle. We won't do this today. Well, I don't know. Should we? Yeah, let's save it tomorrow. See y'all later. Bye-bye.